What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. Today's video is a little off the current trajectory and some of the content that I've been making, but not really. I mean, it all ties back to this ultimate fundamental question of what's our purpose on this planet, what exists beyond this life, where does our consciousness go after we leave our physical bodies, all that good stuff. And we're actually coming back to Bryan Johnson, somebody that I've mentioned a couple of times in a few videos, but when I've mentioned him, it's really through the lens of different thought paradigms of what life is all about. Does consciousness exist beyond the body or not? And Bryan Johnson was my example of a materialist, a materialist perspective where it at least, and this is my interpretation of everything he said in interviews, where he seems to not buy into any thoughts of life beyond the physical body. He was Mormon. And now basically essentially agnostic or atheist. And that's why this video popped up, or that's why this video is of great interest to me, because he just did something incredible. And I'm very, very curious to see how this impacts his thoughts about consciousness and about existence within the body and beyond the body and after the body and all that good stuff, because he did something very, very intense. And the reason why I want to talk about it in particular is because I've actually done the same thing as well. And I've never talked about it publicly, but I'm going to talk about it in this video and give you guys my context and fill in some of the gaps in his accounts as well. So we're getting into some very, very, very interesting stuff. This is something that I've been actually wanting to talk about on this channel for some time. So buckle up and get ready. We're going to talk about Bryan Johnson, and then I'm going to get into my personal experience as well, which I've never shared before, and the revelations that came as a result. And it's funny too, because if I think about my life since that experience, I don't know what to attribute to that experience exactly, but certainly my life has changed, and the way I think has changed pretty drastically, gradually, albeit, but pretty drastically since this experience. Okay, what am I talking about? We're going to find out right now, but let me play this video and let's get into the mix. Here we go.
Oh, and
Yeah, I did 5-MeO DMT, which is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. Somewhere between 5 and 10 times more powerful than DMT. And so, yeah, it's been 48 hours. I'm still learning how to.
Okay, so we get into that. That's what he did. Did 5-MeO DMT, and as he describes, it's the most powerful hallucinogen on the planet. And when I get into my experience, I'll go into a lot more detail, but I did this in 2024. So just under 2 years ago. And I will give you guys the context, but the reason why I did it is I just felt it was calling to me. And I think that's what a lot of the people that run these sort of spiritual ceremonies that involve this hallucinogen, that you should do it when it calls to you. And it had been calling to me for over a year. I felt like I really needed to do it, and I couldn't explain why. I think what's one way that I described it was, and again, like so many of my thoughts and beliefs have changed since this time, but I just kept saying, man, I think I have a message waiting for me, and this is my way to pick up the phone and get that message. And it didn't exactly unfold the way I anticipated, but it was a insane experience. But first, let's get into Bryan Johnson's experience. I want to, so we can see, oh shoot, I thought it was spelled with a Y. Sorry. So it's Bryan Johnson with a Y, but then I thought I saw it somewhere else with a I. Anyways, apologize for the spelling mistake. But let's get into Bryan's 5-MeO DMT experience told through his words and through his lens. And it's pretty wild.
then you decided to try 5-MeO this weekend.
Yes.
Walk me through the experience, because you televised the whole thing. It was live streamed. You looked amazingly calm going into it and going through the process. Walk us through your experience.
Yeah, I think those who have done 5-MeO would probably relate with me that it feels like an impossible task to explain what it's like. So that caveat said, I'll give it a go. I'm stunned, absolutely floored, speechless. You basically experience raw consciousness and raw intelligence. It's this. So when I say these words, take these words that I convey to you, take that idea, multiply it by 1,000, and then move out infinite depth, infinite width and depth, and then dimensions. And like that gives you kind of like a rough map of like the size and space that you deal with. And it was incredibly hard because you get blasted into this space that is so foreign, you don't even know what's happening.
It happens very quickly.
Like you inhale it. I did 9 milligrams of intramuscular and then 18 of vaporized, and it hits you within 10 seconds. You're just you're out. And so, but what happens is you get in that space, and then
visual changes.
Very, very little visual. Like you see on DMT, it's a very visual. You'll meet the, like the elves or whatever else. This is not a visual experience, but you get in this world and you lock in to basically, you either panic because you feel like the gates of hell are going to open, that the stream of existence is going to just tear you to shreds. It's going to shard you. And if you give up,
like break your brain.
Yeah. Like if you feel like it's going to like threaten your sanity, like, is it going to chop you up into little pieces? And so in that moment, you have to say, do I try to wrestle this? And I need to just like wait it out until it's over, or you just relent and you say yes. And you have to, in that moment, you have to say yes so thoroughly. You have to release all attachment, all preconditions, all want, all desire. You have to release self, ego, control. You just have to just relent entirely. And then when you do that, it opened up this unimaginable bliss and euphoria. And I again, this is like a V1 of trying to explain this, but if I list out the most dynamic experiences I've had of a human, like certain accomplishments, or getting married, or having a child, or overcoming a difficulty, or like, state your list of things. This is without question the most dynamic experience I've ever experienced as a human.
Does the internal chatter, the internal monologue of the ego turn off?
Does.
So you can't hear yourself speaking. How do you rationalize what's going on if you don't have a dialogue going on?
It's this visceral feeling. Like you're hyper aware of what's happening. It's not like you block out in the first, like when you take a very high dose, you don't really know what's happening in the first few minutes, but then you kind of come to and you're hyper aware of everything. It's not visual, but it's this, you're in the depths of existence. Like this, it's just the most majestic experience achievable by a human, by intelligent life. I just can't imagine anything more miraculous.
You've studied the biology, the biochemistry. What goes on in the brain as this molecule hits your neurons?
Yeah, so, I mean, like it. One, it completely dissolves your default mode network.
Describe what that is.
So, like, this is the engine that constructs self and ego. And so as you ruminate, like you're going through,
thinking through your day, what's next?
Exactly.
How am I feeling?
Yeah.
What should I be doing right now?
Yeah,
constant conversation.
Yeah. Do I feel bad about myself? Do I feel, like am I shy? Am I like, do I feel bad about whatever? Like you're doing this rumination stuff. Kids don't have this rumination loop. Their default mode network is quiet. And as you age, you basically build up this default mode network into more stiffer patterns. And so as you age, your experience of reality becomes increasingly narrow. You have these big ruts that form. And so you can just see people in their patterns, like how open a child is to say like very random things. And as adults, you're just you're shut in. Like when I did psilocybin, one of the reasons why we did it is because it does have this effect where it dampens the.
Okay, so there's the summation of his experience, and we're going to go on and show some more clips, but I want to describe this default mode network a little bit more in detail. It's a large-scale brain network, primarily the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, that becomes highly active during restful introspective thought rather than external tasks. It asks the brain's autopilot, managing self-referential thought, daydreaming, memory retrieval, future planning. So like he said, it's that rumination. Its primary role includes self-referential thought, thinking about yourself, remembering the past, imagining future scenarios, social cognition. It's that constant rumination, the constant chatter that we try to quiet when we meditate. And when he asks, is it shut off? It's like a funny question to me, because if you've never tried it, you don't realize how silly of a question that is, because you're not you. When it's so my experiences are a little bit different than the way that Bryan Johnson describes it. And actually, I'm a little bit jealous almost of the way that Bryan explains it, in terms of it being like the most incredible. He compares to having kids, to getting married, all these other milestones, and says nothing compares whatsoever. No life experiences compare whatsoever. The difference, though, with my experience was that I blasted off, and I'm going to go into more detail in terms of my experience at the end of this video. You definitely blast off, and I actually think you leave your body. I think it's an out-of-body experience, is the only way that I can explain it. But I did not have that moment of where it's like pure existence, where you're hyper aware. In fact, and maybe I did, but I don't remember it. That's the problem. There was things that I remember, and then I remember nothing. And I was out for, I think, around like 20 or 25 minutes. And then I remember, what I remember next is coming to and looking at my hands and being like, and it was still kind of my vision was still a little, not fuzzy is not the right word, but I could see like multiples of things in my hands. But I remember just being like, oh, I'm back in my body. I'm back in my body. That's what I remember. And like I said, I'll go into more detail when we get to that portion of the video. But I didn't have that like insane peaceful feeling and like super hyper awareness, or at least I can't recollect it, unfortunately. So that's the difference with my experience. The reason why I'm so fascinated, though, by Bryan Johnson's experience of this is because, as I mentioned before, he is primarily viewed as and considers himself a materialist. And it's like, when you have this experience, and I already felt this way though prior to having going through this protocol, but like when you have this experience, especially I imagine as a materialist, your view of what is consciousness and what are you, what is your identity, gets so destroyed, because it's like, when you view things through a materialist viewpoint, which I did for a long time, you feel you and your body are intermingled as one. There's no division. When your physical self dies, you cease to exist. But when you do this, when you have this experience, it feels so obviously clear that is not the case, because you are completely separated. And that's what it feels like. And I think that's what he's experiencing. So what I'm so curious to know after this point is how does Bryan Johnson's viewpoint of life and existence and the soul and consciousness, how is that going to change? Because I guarantee you it's going to change. I just don't think he's ready to talk about it yet, but I can almost guarantee without a doubt that this will change, and it will change dramatically. And I think it's great. I think it's amazing, because I think he should and need this type of perspective when he's pursuing his goals, because, as I mentioned in previous video, I think right now, to some extent, he's just pursuing it. I don't want to say blindly, but pursuing it just to see what he can do, without really thinking through about, well, what should my end goal be here in the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of where's our consciousness coming from, and where is it meant to go, and what is the greater design, you could say, or greater purpose, or whatnot. And I think this is going to add so much context to his work as he continues to plod forward. So I'm very, very fascinated to see how all of his viewpoints transmute as we go forward. Now, this is the last little clip that I want to showcase, and then I'm going to get into the entire detail of my journey, how it began, what I was going through at that time, because that's also extremely relevant, and then how I felt after the fact. And this is basically this is Bryan's experience of how he felt after the experience and what has changed.
And 5-MeO DMT compared to psilocybin, like, just absolutely like blasted clean my default mode network. It felt like psilocybin dampens it, like it softens it, but this thing just annihilated my default.
Turned it off completely. Yeah.
Like,
it just doesn't run the same way.
Like, for an example, like
to say it doesn't run the same way again, like I get this guy has probably never done it, so he's trying to put it in a framework that makes sense to him. You can't, it's not that it does not exist. You are separated. You literally are separated from your body and from all of that. The thought, whatever, however it works, why we have these ruminations, why we have this self-doubt, is that a product of our own minds? Is that a product of external conditioning? I don't know how it works, but it's like, imagine as if your brain's an antenna, and right now we're just in waves and waves of radio waves that are influencing your brain and making you have these ruminations, have these self-doubts. Like you're caught in a current, and it's just like you're trying. And when you meditate, you try to block it out, you try to tune it out, but it's still bombarding your brain. When you do 5-MeO DMT, you shoot off to a dimension where there are no waves, where there's not. You get what I'm saying? It's pure silence and awareness. And so it's almost like a funny question to say, oh, so it's kind of dampened. No, it's not dampened. It does not exist. There is no, it's like you're just in another spot, pure consciousness, separate from this world and your physical body and the woes of this planet, etc.
This morning I woke up catching myself laughing in a dream. I have not laughed in a dream. I don't even know when I've ever laughed in a dream. But that is, after I woke up, I was like, that's really weird. Like, I don't remember laughing. I looked it up, and like, that is a characteristic of a child.
Right.
And so you are restored to this childlike state. And I mean, the past couple of days, I have felt childlike. You know, yesterday morning, I felt that, you know, that emergent excitement, the bubbling of like, today's so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm going to do new things. I'm going to have new experiences.
Yeah.
That you're just excited about all things. I haven't felt that. I don't even know when, you know, for so many years. So like, it really was profound on every layer. And I see it, I'm stumbling too, because I didn't even know how to talk about it yet.
During the day, you're hanging out, you're walking around. Is your brain having the same normal chatter that it did before? Or do you think that there's a persistent change in that default mode network?
Yeah, definitely a change. Like I was with my partner, Kate, yesterday, and we, I did something that made her upset. And so like in that situation, you know, like when couples are in that moment, you have like this negotiation. How do I sort this? And it all just became so clear to me, like when children have a fight, you have it out and then it's just like done.
Yeah.
And you move on. But then adults take that and they like package it up and like they want to weaponize it, be like, I got something on you. Right? I'm like, move it. I'm going to move the chess pieces and like try to leverage this. And
or they store it up like a snake in one of those things that pops out all the snakes
Yeah,
later.
exactly.
You know, it's like package it all up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like we had this, and I just felt absolutely like no need to escalate or to defend or to like, it was just easy. And it was a breakthrough in our relationship where I was able to communicate with her in a way. And so it's like laughing in my sleep. It's how I deal with my partner when I walk around. I just feel so much, I feel so much more funny, you know, like my ability to make quips that are just immediate, you know, like, so yeah, I just feel renewed as a person in a way that I just really didn't imagine.
All right. So cool. So a lot of what he said resonates with me. And I want to go back to this default mode network, because that did exactly happen to me as well in terms of a reset. I mean, massive. It took a couple of days. It wasn't immediate, but it took a couple of days. Now you're going to understand why once I get into my entire story. All right. Never talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it now. A little nervous, but here we go. So back in 2024, so actually the story really begins in 2023. So if you guys don't know, if you guys just follow me and watch my stuff on this channel, I first started on YouTube back in 2016 with the first channel that I ever created, which is the Scalar Learning channel. That's it's a YouTube channel focused on education, because I have a tutoring business that I operate, and I myself work specifically in mathematics. So I started building this channel initially covering all sorts of different math topics, but then really focusing and specializing, at least on the channel specifically, focusing a lot on SAT math. And the channel started having some good growth. Like, it took a long time. I worked really, really hard on it. It was still probably under 1,000 subscribers all the way up to 2018. And then it started growing in 2019. I think I hit 10,000 subscribers somewhere around right at the beginning of 2020. And then it started having really, really good growth. Like, right now it's around 118,000 subscribers, which in the grand scheme of things, it's not massive, but for an SAT math related channel or math content related channel, it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. And there was a time when like, if you search SAT Khan Academy math, like, my channel would come up before Khan Academy, because I was doing a lot of Khan Academy SAT content. So there were points where it was just firing on all cylinders, and it was doing great, and it helped my business a lot, and so on and so forth. Anyways, now, having an education YouTube channel is different than a lot of other YouTube channels, because, like, you don't get a lot of negativity. In fact, you get almost no negativity. You get really happy people being so grateful that you're helping them for free. And so you get really kind words and it's amazing. It's incredible. It felt great on a daily basis to get comments from people just saying, thank you, I understand this now. You'd get video testimonials of people that had achieved breakthrough scores that couldn't afford tutoring in countries like India or Brazil or all these other Africa. I had people write in and feature them on the channel. And so it was just this really, really beautiful experience, and it was all positivity. Well, somewhere in 2023, I started getting messages from an individual that started off being not super frequent, and then they started happening more and more frequently, and then they started turning romantic. And I never experienced this before, and it's not something that I would have even ever anticipated or expected on a math channel. And this individual is an adult, and then slowly the messages started increasing in frequency, more and more posts, and then just saying, like, I love you and stuff, like, over and over. It's very repetitive. And then this happened. I started experiencing this on other social media platforms as well, just like more and more stuff. And it was like, I just didn't know what to make of it. And then at one point, at the end of 2023, shortly after I had gotten my dog, actually, at one point in 2023, I went to visit my family for the holidays around Christmas time. And while I was out of town, my neighbors said, hey, there's somebody, I think there's like a homeless person sleeping on your front door in your porch. Like, should we call what do you want us to do? You want us to call the police? So I was like, oh my God, that's weird. So then I checked the cameras. I was out of town, as I said. I checked the cameras later, and there was nobody there. So I was like, I don't think they left. Okay, whatever. Didn't think too much of it. Came back home. And then when I came home, I saw that I had a letter in my mailbox, and the letter said, oh, I don't even want to go into the specifics, but it was a letter from that person. Said that they had found my address and they felt these things and all this stuff. And I'd never met or spoken to this person, but I'd seen the messages, right? And yeah, so it was a stalking situation. This individual, after this period, began harassing me and if you've ever been through this, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, let me explain a little bit. So it's weird, because you might hear this and think, okay, well, that's a little annoying, but not the end of the world, not that big of a deal. By the way, after this point, now that this person knew my address, and then they actually didn't even live in LA, but then they relocated to LA at this point. This person then continued to come to my house over and over and over. I'm guessing somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30, 40 times, but it could be way more, because I don't know every single time. Constantly leaving things in my mailbox, drawing on my front door in a black marker, throwing gifts in my backyard, sitting in front of my house multiple times, urinating in front of my house, because just completely out there. and ringing my doorbell over, and you know what I mean, just would not leave me. And then the calling and the text, I mean, like, it was just incessant. It was insane, completely insane, um to the point where obviously I got a restraining order, and that was a whole hassle and a nightmare in and of itself to just get that thing activated, because this person was very, very hard to track down, and I had to spend a lot of money to do that. But ultimately, I eventually got a restraining order, got it activated, and it still didn't stop. The person, she still continued to come. And every time I would call the police, it's just the thing in living in LA, it takes a while for the police to show up. By the time they show up, she had left. And so we had this game going on over and over. There actually were a couple times where they did catch her in the act, but it was prior to the restraining order getting activated, so they let her go, and so on and so forth. So it was just this played out for about 9 months, 8 months of her 9 months of her coming and coming and over and over and over and over. And just when this happened to me, you kind of start going crazy. And the reason why is because even though nothing had happened up till that point in terms of me getting physically injured or my life being threatened explicitly, when you talk to the police, the problem with these situations is you're obviously dealing with somebody who's not all there, and it can escalate. It can start off in a particular way, like this, and then it can escalate to the point where, and that's very common, where it starts to turn violent. You just don't know when. And this person knows where you live. So the place that is normally supposed to be your place of comfort, your place of safety, it turns into a bit of a nightmare. And then you feel trapped. And your mind runs wild. You talk about the default mode network of the ruminations and the thoughts. It was all fear. It was all, am I going to die? I have to be hyper alert, make sure all my security is at the max, make sure I have weapons, make sure I have, there were points when I had private security, 24 hours, armed guards in front of my house because I was that scared. And so it was just torment constantly for this entire period. And it was a nightmare. Okay. So during this time, actually prior to this whole thing happening, I had already felt the calling to have this experience, but I really felt the desire to have this experience when I was going through all of this stuff. And so I had this, I believe it was in May. This didn't end until August. Okay. So this is right in the middle where I was at one of my lowest points. I mean, I was still at a very low point from May all the way through August. Like it just didn't stop. So I was at one of my very low, I was in the real heart of this horrendous period. And I went to have this experience. And it was with this incredible group, shamans. They had a whole ceremony, which I think is very important if you're ever going to try this. And, people that have been doing this for a long time know how to administer it. I did have the vapor, not the intramuscular like Bryan Johnson was talking about, just the vapor. And I was kind of open. I didn't have a specific intention of what I wanted to see or who I wanted to talk to or what I wanted to experience. I did not, because I was just open. Maybe that is the right way to go into it. I just wanted to see what I was meant to be shown. Let's just put it like that. So that's the context. That's the background. That's where I was mentally. And these are the challenges of just that I was dealing with. I mean, I was just like crying all the time at this point as well, extremely depressed. And by the way, just to give you context, I am not a down person. We all have our moments, but in general, I run at a very happy, like high level. I do things that I love. I work with people that I love. Like I have a life that I really, really enjoy. So this was a very, very uncharacteristic, like extremely, extremely difficult period of my life. Okay. So we go through the practices. We go through these essentially like prayers to protect your spirit during this whole process. And it was obviously my first time, my only time. and they asked, and I was really nervous, and they asked who wanted to go first, and I was just like, let me just do it. I just want to go for it. Let's just do it. I just wanted to jump in and see what it was all about. And so I remember they brought it to me, and I was standing up, and they have two shamans on either side, and they're singing these prayers, and they just take it, and they tell me how much to inhale, when to stop, and then I exhale. Now, this is everything that I can remember. Exhale, release it all, and the first thing that happens is like I'm looking around, and things start to slow down, and then the only way I can describe it, it kind of reminds me of the movie The Matrix, but you know how you see the green like writing come down like that, right? It was like that, but it wasn't green, computer code. It was like okay, if stained glass windows, it was like, okay, or a better way to think about it is if our regular reality, we're looking out at everything through a glass. It was like the glass that I'm looking through just started cracking and fissuring all the way, and there was like I believe like a purple overlay or something, greenish purple overlay. It just goes like the cracks, and just like this crystallized pattern just came down over my eyes. And I was just like, what is going on? I'm looking around, and and then I'm still looking through this crystal thing, whatever that was. And then the next thing I remember is boom, rocket ship, just like a shot out of my body. And I think that's what he describes as well. You just get shot into a void. And I've never heard anybody else describe it this way. And I'm curious to know if anybody else has thought about it being this. And all this kind of coincides with the idea that DMT is released in your body at death in high volumes. From my experience, I felt like what it is an inject button for your energy, for your consciousness. That's what I feel like it is, because I literally felt like I was shot out. I just flew out of my body. And just like Bryan said, it was not crazy visual. I got shot out, and it was like I got shot out into just blackness. I was in the middle of nothingness. And then what I remember after that is I saw, this is the best of my recollection, I saw like some geometric figure shape shifting, like almost, it was as if it was like liquidy solid, waxy, just like moving around and manipulating, like you'd imagine you're manipulating a Rubik's Cube, but it was like liquid-ish, and it was like that. And then I don't remember anything. So unlike Bryan Johnson's experience, where he experienced pure consciousness, which sounds amazing, and maybe you need to have that intention to experience it. Or I also wonder if my experience was intentionally blocked from me for whatever reason, by who, for what reason, I don't know. I wonder that as well sometimes, if my consciousness experienced a whole host of things, but I was not able, or blocked from being able to bring it back into my mind. Or maybe one day I'll be able to recollect. I don't know. But that's, unfortunately for now, all I remember. And then the next thing I remember is I'm back in my body. I just was like, boop, I open my eyes. And like I said, I didn't know this, but I'd been out for like 20 minutes. I open my eyes, and I start looking at my hands, and I'm back in my body. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I couldn't believe it. Then I kind of slowly got up. They were amazing. Like, they're like, take your time. You're good. You're coming back. So I slowly got back up, and then I cried. I not just cried, like I wept. I sobbed so hardcore. And I sobbed for around like 20 minutes, just straight. And everybody was bringing me tissue. I was the only person that did this, by the way. There was 8 other people at this experience, at this little retreat. I just cried harder than I think I've ever cried in my life. And I didn't even know why. And they just, all they kept telling me was, you needed that for whatever reason. Why they didn't ask me, why did you come here? What's going on? They didn't ask any of that, but all they said is, that's why you came. You needed that. And it was wild. Now, I'd also had a planned trip to Las Vegas to see my buddy fight, who's an MMA fighter, which was probably not the best timing, but I had to go. I had to see him. I had to support him. And so I didn't want to cancel the trip, but it was probably not the best thing to do right after this experience, but I went straight after this experience. Anyways, so I cried. And obviously, I'm sure there was a large part of it that was related to the situation with the stalker, for sure, because I was still, in fact, the stalker came to the house the very next day, but I was in Vegas, and put some crazy stuff in front of my house. I don't even want to mention what it was. It was just very disturbing. I had to call the police while I was in Vegas. I was devastated. I was crying again. I was super emotional the first couple of days. And then that happened right after. While I'm in Vegas, I'm having to step out of the fight and make this phone call. And it was just a nightmare. And the police came and retrieved all the items that she put in front of my house, and they took it to the police station. It was absolutely insane. But I think when I think back on it, I think the reason why I cried certainly had to do with that, what was happening there. But I know it had to do with a lot of childhood trauma and stuff that I went through when I was a kid, that I think I still held some resentment about. And I feel like by the next day, and it continued on from there, but we talk about the default mode network, man, I released all of it. And still to this day, I look at a lot of the things that I endured as a kid, and a lot of the stuff that I was still upset about and I thought was really unfair, that I had to just like witness and go through, that a lot of times I would get mad about it. I'm like, why did this happen? This only happened because this person wasn't in control of themselves, and like, that's ridiculous, and they should have been, and how dare they, and all stuff. And then I just like, it reset all of that, or I reset it, or there was a whatever, maybe altogether it reset. But for some reason, I came to a brand new understanding after that point of just being like, look, man, people screw up, and ultimately, a lot of the stuff that I went through, it's like, I just realized that what was happening was the people were just doing the best they could, and that's it. And oftentimes we are. Sometimes we aren't. Sometimes we're intentionally going out there to hurt people, but I that was not what was happening for these different things. It was not that. It was just things were happening unrelated to me, but that I had to experience and endure, and that were very traumatizing for me, and probably not out of the ordinary for anybody growing up. It is what it is. I was just so sensitive to this, and I'm still an extremely sensitive person, that was deeply traumatizing to me, but I let all of it go. And so that was one example of my default mode network being reset. Now, the other example, and related to all of that trauma that I was dealing with from the stalker, it didn't release right away. In fact, I was extremely depressed Friday, crying constantly. Saturday, woke up in feeling very, very dark and depressed. Sunday, woke up still feeling quite bad. And Sunday afternoon, I was supposed to go out to Joshua Tree from Vegas. I was supposed to drive to Joshua Tree, and I ended up not going that night, but I said I would go the next day, Monday morning. So I ended up staying in Vegas one more night, Sunday, hanging out with my buddy. And then Monday morning, I woke up. Now, this was the craziest thing. And mind you, up to this point, I was living in pure fear state, pure terror state, that something was going to happen. I was always freaking out about this individual, this stalker, doing something to me getting all this stuff. And by the way, mind you guys, I have a very, very, very secure home with lots and lots of defense and safety protocols, weapons. I'm trained in Muay Thai. At this point now, I've been training for almost 7 years. Like, I know how to fight. But regardless, I was just in a perpetual state of fear and feeling powerless and all this stuff. I don't know. it was just a weight. Like this is the time where I felt like I think Bryan Johnson is feeling right now. It just woke up in pure ease of mind, and I was reset to my core. And I was like, yo, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to be okay. And you know what? This isn't going to bother me anymore. I had an appointment with my therapist that day, and she was like shocked because she knew what I had done, and we had talked about it ahead of time and after the fact. And we had talked all that weekend when I was still really down in the dumps. And she was blown away, and she's like, "Okay, I'm very curious to see how long this lasts." And of course, look, it's like anything in life, right? It's not a one thing that fixes everything. It's a reset. And it reset me utterly and completely. Not to mention, it definitely, now for me, I already had at this point was already feeling, I'd already been watching a lot of near-death experience videos, so I already had opened up my mind majorly to the idea of eternal consciousness, and had a lot of ideas about what consciousness and existence looked like potentially. At least at that point, I felt good about what I thought it looked like beyond the scope of this physical life. So it wasn't as though I had a materialist standpoint and then this shattered that reality. It wasn't that. But it was eye-opening just to feel what it was like to separate out completely and utterly, and to have that eject button and take that journey and take that trip. Like, it was completely wild. But yeah, so that default mode network was shattered. But did it sustain indefinitely? No. It did reset after a few weeks. But you have to bear in mind the circumstances. I came back to LA after the trip to Joshua Tree. I was back in my home. I was back in those circumstances and surroundings, and I got more and more visits, right? It began all up again. And with each visit, right, it would push me a little bit backwards and backwards and backwards. I did not reset all the way to how I felt prior to the experience. That's for sure. But yeah, it definitely brought me back down, because when you're, you know what I mean? If it is a great reset for the other stuff that I was talking about that I endured as a kid, that lasted indefinitely, because again, that trauma was not reoccurring and repeating. So I was able to let that go. This was different. The fear state was kind of being reintroduced by virtue of the fact that the scenario had not ended. So yes, I definitely regressed somewhat, but regress isn't even the right word. The trauma traumatized me again because it was still going on. Okay. So that's my experience. That's what it was all about. And it when he says it was the most profound thing by 1,000, or that nothing else in life compares, it was very profound. I don't know if I can say to the exact same extent. And the only reason why is because in my experience, I don't remember a lot of it, or at least I haven't been able to recall it as of yet. Maybe it'll come back to me at some point. So I can't say it was as earth-shattering, amazing, unbelievable as Bryan describes, but it was transformative, transmutive, 100%, absolutely. And yeah, I think it would definitely change somebody's vantage point on life and consciousness if they are coming from a materialist standpoint. So I'm very excited to see what Bryan Johnson has to say in the next few weeks or months about life and consciousness and existence. Last thing I'll say as I end this video, just to tell you guys the end of that story in terms of that individual that was harassing me. In August, this individual finally was apprehended by authorities. So what happened was, I was actually in the middle of a tutoring session, and my doorbell rang. And it's funny, I have still PTSD. Every time my doorbell rings, I panic still to this day. A little bit. It's getting better. My doorbell rang, and I immediately checked the cameras, and once again, it was her. Immediately end the tutoring session, call the police. Again, the problem with LAPD is they're just totally, I have so much respect for the police. and they help me a lot. They help me to the best of their abilities, but they're just so backed up in LA. People don't, you have no idea unless you call the police over and over like I had to for those 9 months. I called them so many times. I had to go to the station so many times, file so many reports. But yeah, so I'm calling. First of all, I think it was even busy at first. I had to call a couple times. I couldn't get through. Finally, I get through. I'm like, please send somebody right now. And I'd also talked to a police officer previously, and he had kind of given me the verbal okay that like next time if we can't get there, I follow this person, follow this individual. And so that's what I did. I called, finally got through to somebody. I said, please, because I could look out my window and I could see the individual was still there across the street watching the house. And I was like, I need you guys now, right now. The restraining order is active. They're violating the restraining order, and they'd already violated it hundreds of times, because once I got it, the phone calls were incessant, nonstop emails. And then the visitations were still happening. So it was like so many violations. I was like, please, please, please. We're doing our best. We're trying to send somebody. And then I was like, okay, I'm following them. Cause then I saw the individual leave and start walking away. So I'm like, I'm following them. They're like, don't do it. I'm like, nope. Police officer told me I could do it. I'm going to do it. I took a weapon with me, non-lethal, but a weapon that I purchased that you're allowed to carry. And I ran out the door, tracked this individual for maybe like a half a mile. All the while on the phone with 911, following from a distance so that I wasn't spotted, all on foot. And then this individual turned into a 7-Eleven parking lot. I followed behind. I didn't want to be too close at this point, because what if they had stopped and I run right into them, right? I didn't know what to expect. And this person is violent, by the way. Just hadn't been violent to me up to this point. I mean, if you count the vandalism of my door and different things like that, yes, but not hadn't tried to hit me or something, let's say. So I waited, and then finally I came around the corner and she was gone. Right at this moment is when the police showed up, right at this moment. So the police show up into the parking lot and they see the weapon on my waist and they're like, sir, what is that? What is that? Hands on the hood of the car right now. And I'm like, oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble here. What's going on? I was like, here you go. I was like, yes, officer, complied, obviously. I was like, oh, and they took it off and they put it on the ground. My weapon. And then it's a Burna. So uses gas cartridges to fire like these pellets. And then they said, what's going on? I was like, officer, this individual has been harassing me, stalking me. I have a restraining order, but I don't know where she went, because I didn't know that she had gone into the 7-Eleven or if she walked down I just couldn't see her anymore. She's got to be close by. I don't know if she got up, but please help me. Right then, she walks out of 7-Eleven. Right there. There she is. She's right there. They go up. They grab her. They put her in cuffs. They detain her while they get through everything. And by the way, I had gone through so many times. Once I'd even filed the restraining order, police were unable to find this. This has happened multiple times. In fact, they had actually detained her and let her go, I think a few weeks before, because they couldn't find the restraining order in their system. And then my neighbor tried to come out and show it to them, and they still wouldn't look at it. And then they let her go. And then later on, they realized that they had made a mistake. Crazy, so frustrating. But anyway, so again, they couldn't find it in their system. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But luckily I had it all in my phone. I looked it up. I showed it to them, and then using some reference numbers or whatever, they were able to find it finally. And they said, okay, we got it. We're going to arrest this individual. Just so you know, we may only be able to hold her for like 24 hours, 48 hours. We don't know. I'm like, listen, I started crying because I was so relieved, because I've been trying for so long to have something done to her. You have to imagine at this point, the restraining order had been violated hundreds of times. But prior to the restraining order, there was 4 or 5 months where I was also harassed and bothered during that time constantly. So it was just so much that had built up at this point, and with nothing being done, zero, nothing. Finally, at this point, that there was at least going to be a little justice, I was over the moon. And by the way, this individual did this to people before me, many, many people. Serial stalker, okay? And I found this out from the police. So then got arrested. And that was like, finally, I was, oh my God, I can be calm and enjoy, walk around the neighborhood, even just for a couple days, and not have to worry and look over my shoulder and always carry a weapon with me. Like, cause I couldn't walk my dog in the neighborhood because I was always worried that something would happen. So it was so amazing and liberating. And I said, I'm going to soak up these next couple of days, whatever it may be. But eventually what happened was, when the police looked at everything and they talked to the district attorney, the prosecuting attorney, you know, they originally thought, they weren't sure what it was going to be, but then they looked at everything in totality, and thank God I'd filed all those reports. It was a big charge relative, right? But it was 2 felony counts of stalking, 6 misdemeanor counts of restraining order violation. And it ended up being a 1.5 years, which I for sure felt was fair. If not more, could have been doled out. I mean, and the judge even lambasted this individual, being like, how could you do this? This person told you a million different ways, to leave him alone. He had private security that served you with restraining order. Then you got it served again, and you were put on notice by the police countless times, and you wouldn't leave him alone. She's like, how dare you? I 100% agree. And to give you the final update, in December of 2025 is when this individual was released. And I was freaking out in December. I was worried that it was going to start all over again. I talked to in the weeks leading up to it, I talked to the police multiple times. My anxiety levels started rising. But up till now, I haven't heard a thing. And yeah, it's been incredible. In fact, as I'm telling the story, it just reminded me like how grateful I need to be on a daily basis that this ordeal has ended. If this individual was to return or contact me in any way, the penalties and punishment would be extremely severe. And I think she knows that. And I think that's why I am not being bothered anymore. But yeah, there it is. So that's the whole story. If you guys want to know the end to that story, there it is. Never talked about it like this before. So putting it all out there. And that's all I got. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. And thank you to everybody who's been following along with this journey, who's been sending me pretty much all positive, kind messages, and give me a lot of book recommendations as well, and helping me on this journey, because this is a collective journey. This is not my journey alone. And this is not me teaching or telling you guys. Like I said, I'm learning, and I'm just sharing what I'm learning as I'm going along. So thank you everyone so much for joining. That's all I got. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.